I can still feel the cold air on my skin, the kind of cold that makes you wonder if it's the weather or your own reality that's freezing you. The night she left, it was one of those rare, crisp evenings where the sky felt like it was holding its breath, just waiting for something to change. I didn't know it was coming. Not in the way you might think. I never saw it coming at all. I was sitting at the kitchen table, staring at a cup of coffee that had long since gone cold. The house was silent, like it always was in the mornings before the world woke up. I'd gotten used to the silence. The only sound was the faint ticking of the clock on the wall, a constant reminder of the time I couldn't get back. But that day, the silence felt different. There was something hanging in the air. I didn't realize it then, but it was the calm before the storm. She didn't tell me she was leaving. Not in the way you'd expect. There was no big confrontation, no shouting, no accusations. It wasn't anything like the movies where the wife packs her bags, walks out the door, and the husband stands there in shock. No, this was different. This was more like a slow unraveling, something I should have noticed, but didn't. Her name was Lara, and for as long as I can remember, she was the quiet kind of person. Not in a distant, cold way, just the kind who didn't need to fill the silence. We didn't talk much, not in the way I thought married couples should, but I didn't mind it. She was comfortable in her own skin, and I respected that. I figured I didn't need her to talk all the time to know what she was thinking. I was wrong. That morning, I got up early, like I always did. I poured my coffee, sat down, and went over the emails I had to get through. Lara was still asleep in the bedroom. She had been tired lately, stressed from work, maybe. I knew she was going through something, but I didn't know what. I had stopped asking. I was too tired too. We had both gotten used to the routine of just existing. She'd go to work, I'd go to work. We'd come home, exchange pleasantries, and go to bed. It wasn't perfect, but it worked. But on that day, something changed. It started with the text message. It wasn't an unusual thing for her to be on her phone in the mornings, scrolling through work emails, catching up on news, whatever. But this time, her phone buzzed, loudly enough for me to hear it from the kitchen. I didn't think much of it at first. But then it buzzed again, and again, and then it happened a fourth time. A burst of notifications. It was unlike her. She wasn't the type to be glued to her phone like that. I couldn't ignore it. I tried to brush it off, telling myself it was nothing. But something kept nagging at the back of my mind. Why was she checking her phone so much? What was going on? I shouldn't have done it. I know that now. But at the time, I felt like I had no choice. I grabbed her phone off the counter. I had no intention of snooping, but when I saw her name light up on the screen again, I froze. It wasn't just one person texting her. It was dozens of messages, all from the same person. His name was Ethan. I didn't know who he was. I'd never heard of him before. I quickly opened one of the messages. It wasn't the kind of message you expect from a colleague or friend. It was flirtatious, playful. And then, I saw the words that hit me like a slap in the face. I can't wait to see you tonight. I'm counting the minutes. I felt my chest tighten. I had read it over and over, hoping it was just a mistake. Maybe it wasn't what I thought it was. But the more I read, the more I understood. Lara had been hiding something from me. Something big. Something I didn't want to believe. I put the phone down and stood there for a moment, trying to collect myself. My mind was racing. My hands were shaking. I couldn't focus. I kept asking myself, how long had this been going on? Was this just a one-time thing? Or was it more than that? I wanted to confront her right then and there, but I didn't. Something inside me told me I needed to wait. I needed to know more. I needed to see for myself. I decided to follow her. I know it sounds insane, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I needed to know the truth. I didn't tell her I was going, didn't leave a note, nothing. I just grabbed my jacket, slipped out the door, and got into my car. I followed her at a distance, careful not to let her notice. She didn't go to work like usual. Instead, she turned down a side street, a road I didn't recognize. My heart raced as I tried to keep up, not knowing where she was headed. The more I followed, the more the dread settled in my stomach. I lost her for a few minutes. She took a turn into a narrow alleyway, and I couldn't get through the traffic in time to follow her exactly. But I parked a few blocks away, hoping I could figure out where she was going. And then I saw it. She got out of her car. But it wasn't just her. A man got out of the car with her. Not just any man, Ethan. I watched them walk toward a door, laughing, talking as if they were the only people in the world. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't just an affair. This was something planned. Something they'd been building for a while. She wasn't just betraying me. She was choosing him. I felt numb. The realization washed over me in waves. My mind couldn't keep up with the emotions. Anger, confusion, betrayal, all tangled together. I wanted to confront them right there, but I couldn't. Not yet. I turned around, got back in my car, and drove home. But I couldn't escape the image of them together, the sound of their laughter. It was all I could think about. When I got back to the house, she was already there, as if nothing had changed. But everything had changed. I stood at the door for what felt like an eternity before I walked in. I didn't know what I was going to say. Part of me wanted to scream, shout, accuse her of everything I had just seen. But another part of me, the part that had spent years with her, told me to stay calm, to think things through. I didn't want to make a scene. Not yet. Not until I had all the facts. I closed the door softly behind me, trying not to make a sound. Lara was sitting at the kitchen table, scrolling through her phone, completely unaware of what I had just witnessed. Her hair was loose around her shoulders, and she was humming something under her breath. For a moment, she looked like the woman I had married. The woman I thought I knew. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, but I didn't let it show. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. The tension in the air between us was palpable, even though she hadn't noticed anything yet. The house felt different. It felt like everything had changed in the span of a few hours. "Hey," she said, glancing up at me with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. It was the kind of smile you give when you're hiding something, when you're pretending everything is normal, when you know it's not. "Hey," I replied, my voice surprisingly steady despite the storm brewing inside of me. I walked over to the kitchen counter, trying to keep my movements casual. I didn't want her to see the way my hands were shaking. I poured myself a drink, something strong, just to calm my nerves. It was a bad habit I had picked up over the years, one I hadn't really acknowledged until now. But tonight, it felt necessary. "So, how was your day?" she asked, still focused on her phone, her voice light. I stared at her for a moment, taking in her every movement. The way she held herself, the way her eyes didn't meet mine fully. I wanted to believe it was just a rough patch. I wanted to believe that maybe I had misinterpreted everything. But I couldn't ignore what I had seen. I couldn't ignore the way her eyes had lit up when she was with him. "I don't know," I said, my voice low. "How was your day?" She looked up at me, surprised by my tone, but didn't say anything. She shifted in her seat, clearly uncomfortable. It was like she knew I was onto something, that something wasn't right. But instead of addressing it, she just continued scrolling on her phone, as if that would somehow make everything go away. My mind was racing. I wanted to confront her then and there. I wanted to demand answers. But there was a small part of me that told me to wait, to gather everything I needed first. I wasn't ready to show my cards. "Not yet." "Lara," I said, breaking the silence. "Who is Ethan?" She froze. Her fingers stopped scrolling, and her eyes went wide, just for a split second. But it was enough. It was all the confirmation I needed. I watched as her face shifted from surprise to something else, something that looked almost like guilt, but she quickly masked it with a forced smile. "What do you mean?" she asked, trying to sound casual, but her voice cracked. "The guy," I said, my words slow and deliberate. "The one you've been texting. Ethan. Who is he?" For a long moment, she didn't say anything. I could see her thinking, calculating. I knew she was trying to figure out how to play this, how to deny it. But there was no denying it now. Not after everything I had seen. "He's just a friend," she said, her voice tight. "Someone from work." "A friend," I repeated, my voice colder now. "A friend who texts you at 3 a.m. and sends you heart emojis? A friend who makes plans with you to meet up at night?" I saw the color drain from her face. She opened her mouth to speak, but nothing came out. She just stared at me, her eyes wide, like a deer caught in headlights. I wasn't sure if she was shocked that I knew, or if she was just trying to figure out how to spin the story. But the longer she stayed silent, the more it ate away at me. "You're not a good liar, Lara," I said, my voice quieter now, but carrying a weight I hadn't expected. "I saw you with him tonight." The words hung in the air between us, heavy with the truth. The silence stretched on, and I could feel the air in the room thickening. She looked down, biting her lip, her fingers nervously tapping the edge of the table. And for the first time in years, I saw her truly look lost, like the woman who had once had everything figured out didn't have the slightest clue what to do next. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't want you to find out this way." I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw everything in the room across the room, demand answers, demand to know how long it had been going on, what this man had meant to her, why she had lied to me for so long. But instead, I just stood there, my fists clenched at my sides, feeling like everything I had worked for was crumbling beneath me. You didn't want me to find out? I repeated, almost laughing. You didn't want me to find out that you were seeing someone else behind my back? How long has this been going on, Lara? She didn't answer right away. She just stared at me, like she was trying to figure out whether or not I was going to explode. But I wasn't going to explode. I had already done that in my head 1,000 times. Now, I just wanted the truth. I don't know how to explain it, she said, her voice shaking. It just happened. I didn't plan for it. I didn't mean for it to go this far. But I couldn't stop it. I felt like someone had punched me in the gut. The words didn't hit me like I thought they would. Instead, they just made me feel empty, like a part of me had been hollowed out. This wasn't a moment of realization. It was the moment of complete and utter loss. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. This was it. This was where everything changed. You don't have to explain it, I said, my voice colder now, cutting through the silence. I already know everything I need to know. I turned, walking towards the hallway, and without looking back, I said, You need to leave, Lara. The room was still silent when I left. The only sound was the faint echo of my footsteps against the wooden floor, carrying the weight of everything I couldn't say. The words had left my mouth before I even realized I had said them. You need to leave, Lara. I didn't even wait for her to respond. I just walked away, heading towards the bedroom. The moment I said it, something inside me seemed to snap, like a switch being flipped. It wasn't anger. It wasn't even hurt, not yet. It was just a strange numbness, like I was outside of my own body, watching myself make decisions that didn't feel like mine. As I reached the bedroom door, I could hear her footsteps behind me. She was following me, but she wasn't saying anything. I could feel her presence, heavy, anxious, but I didn't turn around. I couldn't. My body was moving on its own now, like it knew what needed to happen before my mind caught up. I opened the closet door and began pulling out her things, clothes, shoes, random items she kept in the drawers. I didn't care what it was. It could have been something small, something silly, like a forgotten book or a pair of earrings, but in that moment, it all felt the same. It all felt like part of her leaving, piece by piece. Lara's voice broke through the silence. You don't mean that. You can't possibly mean that. I didn't look at her. I just continued pulling clothes from hangers, stuffing them into one of the duffel bags I'd taken from the closet. I felt like a stranger in my own home, watching this scene unfold, unsure of who this man was, packing up his wife's belongings like they were nothing. But I couldn't stop. It was like everything had built up to this one moment, this inevitable conclusion. I do, I said, my voice even calm. Too calm, probably. I mean it, Lara. You've made your choice, and I'm not going to beg you to stay. Not anymore. She was quiet for a moment. I could hear her breathing behind me, the slow, shaky exhale of someone who knew the world was falling apart but didn't know how to stop it. I didn't feel sorry for her. Not right now. Not after everything. Don't do this, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I didn't turn around. I wasn't sure if I wanted to hear her plead. I wasn't sure if I cared. You made it clear you didn't want this anymore, I replied, lifting another sweater from the shelf. So now I'm making it clear that I don't want you here. She took a step closer to me. I could hear the soft shuffle of her feet on the carpet. You don't understand, she said, her voice breaking. This wasn't about you. It wasn't about us. I don't know how it happened. I never meant for it to go this far. I stopped for a second, my hand frozen in the middle of reaching for another item. Her words hit me, but I didn't want them to. I didn't want her explanation or her excuses. The betrayal was too much. Too raw. You didn't mean for it to go this far? I repeated, finally turning to face her. She was standing in the doorway, her eyes red from the tears she was holding back, her hands trembling at her sides. Lara, how far did you think this would go? How many late-night texts? How many dinners with him before you realized what was happening? What did you think I wouldn't notice? Her face crumpled, the facade of calm she'd been wearing slipping away completely. I didn't think it would hurt you, she said, and there was a part of me that almost believed her, but I couldn't let that part win. I thought it was just something small, something I could keep separate from our life. But I was wrong, okay? I messed up. I stood there, staring at her, The weight of everything I had learned hitting me all over again. The lies, the deceit, the fact that she was standing here, crying, as though her world had just shattered too. It felt like I was in some kind of sick, twisted nightmare where the woman I trusted most had become a stranger. You don't get to decide that anymore, I said, each word heavy with finality. You don't get to come back from this. I saw her step forward, her eyes pleading with me, but I wasn't looking for reconciliation. I wasn't looking for answers anymore. I had all the answers I needed. Please, she whispered, her voice breaking as she reached out to me. I never wanted to hurt you. I never meant for any of this to happen. But I had already heard enough. The truth was clear, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I knew exactly what I needed to do. I moved past her without another word, walking toward the front door. I could hear her footsteps behind me again, but I didn't look back. I wasn't sure if it was the cold air outside or the weight of what I had just done, but the chill I felt was more than physical. It was the finality of it, the end of everything. I opened the door and stood there, holding it wide, my eyes scanning the empty driveway. Get out, Lara, I said, my voice steady, unwavering. You don't need to explain anything else to me. This is it. She hesitated. For the first time, I could see it, the moment she realized she had nowhere else to run. No more excuses. No more hiding. I'm sorry, she said, barely audible now, her voice small and broken. But I didn't want to hear it. I didn't want her apologies. Not anymore. You're sorry, I repeated, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. Sorry doesn't fix this. Sorry doesn't fix what you've done. I didn't wait for her to respond. I slammed the door shut, the sound echoing through the house. I leaned against it, my hands pressed flat against the wood, trying to steady my breathing. The tears I had been holding back, tears I never thought I would shed for her, finally began to fall. But there was no relief. There was no closure. The door was closed, and so was everything else. I had no idea what was next, but for the first time in a long time, I was free. The door had barely slammed shut when I felt a strange sense of calm settle over me. It was as if the chaos of the last few days, all the confusion and uncertainty, had finally left my body, only to be replaced with this almost eerie stillness. It wasn't relief. It wasn't peace. It was emptiness, pure, raw emptiness. I leaned against the door, my hand still resting on the handle as if holding it would somehow keep everything from falling apart completely. The house around me felt cold, colder than it had ever been. The warmth that had once been here, the laughter, the shared moments, gone. In its place was something unrecognizable, something unfamiliar. I could almost feel the weight of her absence in every room, in every corner. I didn't want to look back. I didn't want to see the reality of what was happening, but I couldn't stop myself. I turned around, half expecting her to still be standing there, crying or begging me to take her back. But she was gone, just like that. I had opened the door, and she had left without so much as a glance back. It hit me then, she was really gone. The woman I had spent nearly a decade with, the woman I had trusted with everything, was walking away from me. And the truth was, it didn't hurt like I thought it would. It felt almost like a relief. Like a weight I didn't even know I was carrying had been lifted off my chest. But even as I stood there, trying to process everything, the doubt crept in. Was I doing the right thing? Was I really ready to let go? There had been so many moments, so many years where it felt like we were invincible, like we were unbreakable. But here I was, standing alone in a house that no longer felt like home, second-guessing every decision I had made in the last 24 hours. I walked into the living room, my feet dragging as though they didn't want to move forward. I had no idea what to do next. I wanted to call someone, anyone. I wanted to talk to a friend, to hear something that would reassure me that this was the right thing to do. But my phone was still in my pocket, silent. Everyone I knew had their own lives to live, their own problems. They wouldn't understand. They couldn't. I glanced over at the empty space on the couch where Lara used to sit. I could almost see her there, her legs tucked beneath her as she scrolled through her phone, her eyes focused on some app, the world outside our little bubble slipping by unnoticed. How had it gotten so bad? How had we gone from planning our future together to this? I grabbed my phone, feeling the weight of it in my hand as I debated whether or not to call her. Part of me wanted to reach out, to try and fix things before they got any worse. But the other part of me, the part that had been silent for so long, reminded me that this wasn't a problem I could fix. This wasn't something that could be swept under the rug and forgotten. She had made her choice. She had chosen him. And no apology, no amount of explaining, could take that back. I unlocked the phone, scrolling through my contacts. My thumb hovered over her name, but I didn't press it. Instead, I opened a new message, typing something I knew I shouldn't say. I never thought it would end this way. But I guess you can't really undo betrayal. I stared at the words on the screen, trying to make sense of them. But as soon as I read them, I deleted them. It wasn't right. It wasn't the closure I was looking for. I didn't need her to know how hurt I was anymore. I didn't need to feel like I was chasing after her. She had made her decision, and so had I. I tossed my phone onto the couch and stood up. The house was suffocating me. I needed to get out, to breathe, to clear my head. I walked into the kitchen, the silence of the house echoing around me. I opened the fridge, grabbed a bottle of water, and leaned against the counter, staring out the window into the dark street. The neighborhood was still, like nothing had changed, but I felt like everything in the world had. The truth was, I didn't know what came next. I didn't know how to rebuild from here, if that was even possible. There was so much to figure out. What to do with the house, with our finances, with the life we had built together. But right now, in that moment, it felt like none of it mattered. What mattered was that I had been left behind. And the hardest part? I couldn't even blame her. Not entirely. I had seen the signs. I had ignored the warning signs. I had been too blind to see what was happening right in front of me. I wanted to scream. I wanted to let it all out. The frustration, the confusion, the overwhelming sense of betrayal that was sitting heavy in my chest. But I didn't. I stayed silent, like I had for so long. Because sometimes silence is all you have left. I took another sip of water and looked at the clock on the wall. It was past midnight now. A few hours ago, I had been standing in the kitchen, unaware that my life was about to change forever. Now, I didn't even recognize the person I had become. Was this the same man who had once promised to love her forever? Was this the same man who had believed in them, in their future? I didn't know, and I wasn't sure if I wanted to know anymore. But I knew one thing. This wasn't over. Not yet. There was still so much left to unravel. So many things unsaid, so many questions unanswered. And whether I was ready for it or not, I had to face it. I had to face what she had done to us, to me. But before I could do that, I needed time. Time to think. Time to breathe. Time to figure out how to survive this. How to survive without her. And somehow, deep down, I knew that it wasn't just about surviving. It was about learning to live again. And that was the part one wasn't sure I was ready for. I walked out of the kitchen, grabbed my jacket, and headed for the door. There was a world outside this house. A world that didn't know me as her husband, as the man who had been left behind. It was time to find that world again. It was time to start over. As I stepped outside into the cold night, I didn't look back. I couldn't. The cold night air hit me as I stepped outside, the chills sinking into my skin, making me feel more alive than I had in days. I didn't know where I was going, didn't care, honestly, but my feet moved on their own, carrying me away from the house, away from everything. It wasn't until I reached the end of the block that I realized I hadn't grabbed my phone or wallet. I had left everything behind. There was a strange kind of freedom in it, but also an undeniable emptiness. My mind raced, swirling with 1,000 questions. What happens now? What happens when the dust settles, and I'm left with nothing but memories of a life that wasn't mine anymore? The streetlights flickered above me, casting long, shadowy figures on the pavement, and for a moment, I felt like a ghost, just walking through the motions. I'd been a husband, a partner, a man who believed in the sanctity of his marriage. But now, I was just a man who had been discarded, tossed aside like some used object that no longer had a place in her world. I shook my head, trying to clear the thoughts, trying to shake the fog that had settled in my brain. The anger was there, but it was distant. What I felt more than anything was disbelief. How had I gotten here? How had we gone from what felt like a perfect life to this? I had seen the signs. I had ignored the cracks in our relationship for months, maybe longer. Maybe I was just too tired to notice, or maybe I was too scared to face the truth. I kept walking, not knowing where I was going, but not really caring either. The streets were quiet, the kind of stillness that makes you feel like you're the only person alive in the world. My mind kept flashing back to the night I saw her with him, Ethan. I couldn't stop seeing her face, the way she had looked at him, the way she had laughed with him. That look of affection she hadn't shown me in months. Years, maybe. It wasn't just the betrayal of her affair that hurt. It was everything that came with it. The lies, the distance, the silence, the way she had withdrawn from me, bit by bit, until she was a stranger in my own home. I had loved her. I had given her everything. And in return, she had given me nothing but excuses. The further I walked, the more I realized that I was running away from the house, from the life I had built, but I wasn't running toward anything. There was nothing to run toward. I had no idea what to do, where to go, how to even begin picking up the pieces of the life I thought I had. I stopped at a park bench and sat down, my hands clenched in my lap, the weight of everything settling heavily on my chest. I stared at the empty street in front of me, the quietness almost deafening. I should have felt something, anything, besides the numbness that had consumed me. I should have been angry. I should have been devastated. But all I could feel was emptiness, like I was slowly losing a part of myself that I didn't even know existed. I thought about calling my friends, but I couldn't bring myself to. I didn't want to explain. I didn't want to admit that my life had fallen apart so completely. They'd never understand. They'd tell me to move on, to get over it, to forget about her and find someone better. But I didn't want someone better. I didn't want anyone else. I wanted her. Or at least, I wanted the woman I thought she was. I wanted the woman who had held my hand in the dark, the one who had promised me forever, the woman who had laughed with me, who had shared her dreams and fears, the woman who had looked at me like I was the only one who mattered in the world. But that woman was gone. She had been replaced by someone I didn't recognize, someone who had the audacity to stand in front of me and tell me she didn't mean for it to happen. She didn't mean for it to go that far. I let out a breath, the sound coming out more like a sigh, a mixture of frustration and resignation. I didn't know what I was supposed to do now. I didn't know if I was supposed to forgive her or hate her. I didn't know if I was supposed to fight for her or let her go completely. But I knew one thing. Whatever happened next, I couldn't go back. I couldn't keep living like I had been. I couldn't keep pretending that everything was fine when it was all falling apart. A few minutes passed, and the numbness started to wear off, replaced by a dull, gnawing pain that settled deep in my chest. I reached into my pocket, finally pulling out my phone. I stared at the screen for a long moment, my finger hovering over her contact name. I could still call her. I could still apologize. I could beg for another chance, tell her that I would do anything to fix it. But I couldn't. I wouldn't. I had to let her go. And somehow, even though it felt impossible, that was the only way I could begin to move forward. I stood up from the bench, my legs stiff from sitting too long, and started walking again. I didn't have a destination in mind, but that didn't matter anymore. All that mattered was that I was moving away from the past, moving towards something unknown, something that didn't involve her. I kept walking through the empty streets, past the houses, past the memories. I could still see her face in my mind, but it didn't hurt as much. Not anymore. The ache was there, but it was different now. It wasn't the sharp, gut-wrenching pain of betrayal. It was the dull ache of loss. I didn't know what would happen next. I didn't know how long it would take to get over this. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe again. And that was a start. As I walked into the unknown night, I realized something. No matter how far I ran, no matter how much I tried to escape the past, it would always be there. The pain, the memories, the love I had for her, it would always be a part of me. But I didn't need her to define who I was anymore. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I could start again. The city felt different at night, strange, almost unfamiliar. The silence of the streets, the distant hum of traffic, and the occasional flicker of a street lamp were the only things I could hear as I kept walking. I didn't have a destination in mind, but that didn't matter anymore. I needed to move, to do something. Anything, really, other than sit at home in that empty house, the place where I had shared so much with Lara. The place that now felt like a museum of memories, memories that I wasn't sure I could ever look at again. I wasn't sure how much time had passed, but I eventually found myself at a small, quiet bar on the corner of a street I didn't recognize. The sign above the door buzzed faintly in the night air. The kind of place you don't come to unless you're trying to escape. I stepped inside without thinking twice. The dimly lit room was practically empty except for the bartender, wiping down glasses, and a few scattered patrons nursing drinks at the bar. I took a seat at the far end, away from everyone, and ordered a whiskey. Neat. It felt like the first time in days that I could actually sit still, without the noise of my thoughts trying to tear me apart. I picked up the glass, feeling the burn as the alcohol slid down my throat. It wasn't about the drink. It was about the numbness, the way it helped dull everything else. It was like I had been running for so long, constantly trying to stay ahead of the storm, and now, for the first time, I was just standing in the middle of it. I looked into the glass, seeing my own reflection in the dark liquid. I didn't recognize the person looking back at me. My face was haggard, tired. The eyes, those eyes that had once been full of hope, now seemed empty. What happened to me? How had I gotten so lost in this life, in this marriage, that I didn't even know who I was anymore? I wasn't angry, not anymore. Anger was too exhausting. It was betrayal that I couldn't shake off. It wasn't just Lara's affair. It wasn't just the lies or the late-night texts or the cold distance between us. It was the fact that I had let it all happen, that I had stood by and watched as things slipped through my fingers without even realizing it. I had let her drift away, piece by piece, until she was a stranger, and by then, it was too late. I thought about what I'd said to her earlier, those words that had slipped from my lips without even a second thought. You need to leave. In that moment, I had meant it. But now, as I sat here in the dimly lit bar, I wasn't sure anymore. Was that really what I wanted? Was I sure I was ready to let go of everything? A part of me wanted to text her, to call her, to say I was sorry for being so harsh. But another part of me, the part that had taken control when I had thrown her out of the house, knew I couldn't do that. She had made her decision. And as much as it hurt, I had to respect that. I had to respect that we were over, that I had been nothing but a chapter in her story, one she was ready to close. I looked at the bartender as he slid another drink toward me. You okay, man? He asked, his voice low but kind. I could tell he wasn't really looking for an answer. He was just trying to keep the conversation going. I nodded, not trusting my voice to say anything. What was I supposed to say? Yeah, I'm fine, just going through a little personal stuff. Everyone had their problems, their demons. And I knew I wasn't the first person to sit at a bar and try to drink away their pain. So, I kept quiet. I took the drink, swirled it around, watching the ice clink against the glass, then took another sip. As I sat there, I couldn't help but wonder, what would my life look like now? What was next? The world outside this small bar was still moving forward, but for me, everything felt like it had stopped. Every corner I turned, every street I walked down, reminded me of the life I had built with Lara, the dreams we had, the future we were supposed to have. But none of that was real anymore. It was a mirage, a picture I had painted in my head, but the colors had all faded away. And the worst part? I didn't know who I was without it. Without her. But maybe that was the point. Maybe this was the chance I needed to find out. A few more drinks went down, and the bar started filling up with more people, the noise picking up around me. But the world still felt distant. The music in the background, the laughter, the chatter, it all seemed so far away. I wasn't a part of it. I wasn't even sure I wanted to be. I had to face the truth. I had to face that my marriage was over, that it had ended in a way I couldn't have imagined. But in a way, I felt a little free. I didn't have to pretend anymore. I didn't have to keep up the facade of a happy, perfect marriage. I didn't have to keep pretending that everything was fine when it wasn't. But even that didn't feel like enough. I needed something more. I needed closure, but I didn't know where to find it. The door of the bar opened, letting in a burst of cool air, and I looked up to see a man walk in. He was tall, wearing a jacket that looked too expensive for this dive bar, his hair perfectly styled. He scanned the room for a moment, and then his eyes landed on me. He hesitated, as if deciding whether or not to approach, but then, with a slight smile, he walked over. Hey, he said, his voice friendly but not too intrusive. Mind if I sit? I shrugged, barely looking at him. I didn't care. At this point, anyone who wanted to talk could sit down. I wasn't really paying attention. He sat down next to me, ordered a drink, and then we both lapsed into a quiet, comfortable silence. But then, after a few moments, he leaned over, almost like he was about to say something important. You know, he said slowly, sometimes the best way to heal is to stop thinking about it. Let go of all the guilt. Stop trying to fix everything, because, sometimes, things aren't meant to be fixed. I looked at him, confused. I hadn't asked for advice, but his words seemed to hit something deep inside me, something I didn't know I was ready to hear. I opened my mouth to respond, but before I could say anything, he leaned back in his chair and smiled, like he knew exactly what I was thinking. Just a thought, he said, and then he turned his attention to his drink. I sat there for a moment, turning his words over in my head. Was that it? Was I trying too hard to fix things that were never meant to be fixed? Had I been holding on to the wrong things all this time? I didn't know the answers yet, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was getting closer to them. And maybe, just maybe, that was the first step toward moving on. I sat there in silence for a long while after the man spoke those words, trying to wrap my head around what he had said. Maybe he was just some random guy, trying to make conversation, trying to sound philosophical in a place where people come to forget. Or maybe he was right. Maybe I had been holding on to the wrong things for too long, trying to fix a relationship that had already been broken. It was hard to admit, but the more I thought about it, the more it made sense. I had spent so much time trying to hold on to the idea of us, of the life we were supposed to have, that I had stopped paying attention to the reality in front of me. Lara had already checked out, and I had been too blind to see it. I had been holding on to memories, to moments that were long gone, while she had moved on, piece by piece. Maybe I was chasing a ghost. Maybe that's all love ever is, a ghost of what it once was, something you hold on to because you don't know how to let go. I realized, for the first time, that the hardest part of all this wasn't her leaving me. It was the realization that I hadn't truly let go of her long before she physically left. I had been clinging to the past, to an idealized version of our love that no longer existed. I downed the rest of my drink, the burn of the alcohol doing little to quiet the thoughts swirling in my head. The bartender gave me a knowing look, as if he could see the storm raging inside me, but he didn't say anything. Maybe he knew I wasn't ready to hear more advice, or maybe he was just letting me be. Either way, it didn't matter. I wasn't looking for answers. Not from him, not from anyone. I was just looking for a way to breathe, to give myself permission to feel what I needed to feel without the weight of everything else bearing down on me. The man who had spoken to me got up a few minutes later, leaving a generous tip on the bar before walking out into the night. He didn't look back, didn't offer a final word. He was just gone, like the advice he'd given me was meant to be a fleeting moment, something that didn't need to stick around to make an impact. I watched him go, and for some reason, that made me feel lighter, like I could breathe again, even if just for a moment. It was as if his presence had been the catalyst for some internal shift I hadn't even known I needed. I stayed at the bar for a while longer, lost in thought, until the place started to fill up. The noise of laughter and conversation began to pick up, the once quiet, somber atmosphere turning into something livelier. But I didn't feel like being part of it. The walls felt like they were closing in, the noise grating on my nerves, so I decided it was time to leave. As I stood up, I tossed a few bills onto the counter and made my way to the door. The cool night air hit me again as soon as I stepped outside, and I took a deep breath, savoring the crispness. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I couldn't go back to that house yet. Not tonight. I needed more time. I walked through the streets, the city alive with its own rhythm, people moving, cars passing by, lights flickering in the distance. It was all so ordinary, so unaffected by the storm that had just torn through my life. But I didn't feel like an outsider. I didn't feel lost in the sea of faces, or alone in the anonymity of the night. For once, it felt like I was exactly where I needed to be, in the middle of all of it, without any expectations, without any pressure. I wandered for what felt like hours, my mind still circling the same thoughts, the same questions. What now? What was left of me? What was left of the man I had been before Lara? The one who believed in love, in forever. The one who thought he could build a life, a family, a future, with someone who would stand by his side. I came to a park, the grass still wet from the earlier rain, the ground soft beneath my shoes. There were no benches here, no lights, just the rustling of trees in the wind and the hum of the city far off in the distance. I walked to the middle of the open space, stopping to look up at the sky. The stars were hidden by clouds, but the faint glow of the city's lights shone through. It was a beautiful sight, despite the emptiness I still felt inside. I sat down on the damp grass, letting the coolness seep into my jeans. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel the need to rush. I didn't need to figure out everything right away. There was no timeline, no deadline. Life wasn't something that could be fixed overnight, and maybe that was okay. Maybe I had to let things unfold on their own. Maybe I had to let myself heal without forcing it, without looking for shortcuts. And in that moment, As the wind blew across my face, carrying away the thoughts and the guilt and the pain, I realized something. I didn't need to go back to the past. I didn't need to hold on to what was gone. I wasn't defined by her. I wasn't defined by what had happened between us. I was still me. I still had a life to live. I still had choices to make. I stood up, brushing the grass off my jeans, and looked around at the quiet park. The world was still turning. And so was I. The first step was the hardest, but I was starting to take it. Slowly, but surely. The pain was still there, deep in my chest, but it was no longer the thing that controlled me. I was in control now. And no matter how long it took, I would find my way through this. I walked out of the park and back onto the streets, the city alive around me. The night wasn't over, and neither was my story. The streets were still alive, the night embracing the world with a cool but gentle touch. I walked with purpose now, the weight in my chest lightening with every step. The park, the bar, even the endless walks through the empty streets, they had all led me here. To this moment. To the realization that I wasn't alone, and I didn't have to be. I was no longer trapped in the grief of what was lost. I wasn't just surviving. I was moving forward. The pain of betrayal would always be a part of me, but it no longer defined who I was. I was more than the man who had been left behind. I was someone who had lived through it, learned from it, and, most importantly, had begun to rebuild. As I walked, I couldn't help but think of Lara, not with the anger or sadness I had once felt, but with a kind of quiet acceptance. She had made her choices, and so had I. We were no longer part of each other's journey, but I wasn't bitter about it. It was time for both of us to find our own paths, separately. The love we had was real, once, but sometimes love isn't enough. Sometimes, the best thing you can do for each other is to let go. And letting go was the hardest part. But I had done it. I found myself standing in front of a cafe I had passed 100 times before, never stopping to go inside. It was small, cozy, the kind of place that felt warm even from the outside. A few people sat inside, chatting quietly over mugs of coffee, but it wasn't crowded. I looked at the sign above the door, the words, "Open 24 hours," glowing softly in the night. Without really thinking about it, I walked in. The smell of fresh coffee hit me immediately, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was exactly where I needed to be. I ordered a coffee, black, as I always liked it, and found a seat by the window. The rain had started again, tapping gently against the glass, but it was a peaceful kind of sound. It was the kind of atmosphere that made you want to stay, to take a breath and appreciate the simple things. I sat there for a while, letting the warmth of the drink settle in my chest, my thoughts drifting. The world outside seemed so distant, but in the best way. I wasn't running anymore. I wasn't trying to fill the space in my life with anything. I had started to realize that I could be happy with just myself. I could find peace in my own company, and that, I realized, was the foundation of anything real. The barista came by and smiled at me, her eyes soft and friendly. "You look like you've got a lot on your mind," she said. I smiled back, surprised at how natural it felt. "Yeah," I said, pausing to think for a moment. "But it's okay. I think I'm starting to figure things out." She nodded, clearly sensing the shift in my mood. "That's good. It's not easy, but it sounds like you're on the right track." I took another sip of coffee, the warmth spreading through me, and something inside me finally clicked. I wasn't broken. I wasn't ruined. I was simply changing, evolving into someone new, someone stronger, wiser, and more aware of what I wanted out of life. I had the ability to start fresh, to create the life I wanted from this point forward. The clock on the wall ticked away, the minutes slipping by as I sat there in the stillness of the cafe. The weight of the past had finally been lifted. The future no longer seemed like a terrifying unknown. Instead, it felt like a blank canvas, waiting for me to paint the next chapter of my story. I didn't know what would come next. I didn't know where my journey would take me, or who I might meet along the way. But I knew this. I was no longer afraid. I was ready. I was ready for whatever life had to offer, whatever lessons I still had to learn, and whatever adventures were waiting just around the corner. When I finished my coffee, I stood up, paid the barista, and walked back out into the night. The rain had stopped, leaving the world feeling fresh and new. The streets weren't as empty as they had felt before. There was life all around me, and for the first time, I felt like I was a part of it. I smiled to myself as I walked, the familiar weight of my past no longer holding me back. It wasn't perfect, but I didn't need it to be. All I needed was the courage to take one more step. And for the first time in a long time, I knew I could. The future, whatever it held, was mine to create. And it was going to be okay. It was more than okay. It was going to be beautiful,